So, necromancy and miracles, the manipulation of life and death. In this video, we'll be talking about necromancy and miracles, which is better known as Vitalus Manipulatus. We're going to start with my favorite form of magic, necromancy, and then we'll move into talking about miracles. I'm sure some of you have at least heard of the game known as Elden Ring. In this game, when a normal creature dies, they return to the Erd Tree and become one with the Greater Will. This is essentially the end of their consciousness, and they basically become a single mind, all as part of the Greater Will. Now, the player, on the other hand, is known as a Tarnished, spoken to as ye dead who yet live. They are basically zombies, but not zombies in the traditional sense. They are fully flesh, rather than being a rotting corpse that walks. They can die, just like anything else, but when they die, they will rise again, just more angry than before, and more skilled. Then there are those who live in death, also known as skeletons. When killed, they reassemble themselves and rise back up. They can be permanently killed, but only when they are struck midway through a resurrection. This is basically the same as an Erd Tree burial. They return to the Erd Tree, given final rest. Those who live in death are basically zombies in the traditional sense, raised by necromancy. They are pretty much mindless, but despite this, there's still a few people who think they should be treated equally to humans, even though they're mindless undead. I just don't think the fact that something used to be a person necessarily makes it a person now. I mean, if one of your ancestors rose from the dead and tried to eat you, would you still think it's them? But speaking of rising from the grave, let's discuss the undead from Dark Souls. They are immortal creatures, for the most part. They rise from their graves after every death, and they keep coming back to kill whatever they want to kill. However, with every death, they get closer to insanity. The stronger their will, the longer they can last. However, if an undead goes insane, they become one of the many hollows found around the ruined settlements of the game. At least then, when they have finally gone fully hollow, they can die a final death. I really love the concept of a creature being able to just defy death and rise again, over and over again. They can also absorb strength from the souls of those they kill, making them stronger and stronger with each monster they put in the ground. The undead in Dark Souls are really cool, and unless they have an iron will, they'd better go find a coffin to huddle up inside. Another type of undead I'd like to talk about are liches and death knights from Dungeons & Dragons. Liches are powerful undead that made themselves immortal through magical means. They technically aren't undead until they die for the first time, but after that, when they rise from their first death, then they are classified as undead. They are magical items that hold a piece of a lich's soul, known as phylacteries. Some liches have multiple, others have just one, and some liches share a single phylactery among multiple. Think of the Horcruxes from Harry Potter. They were devices made by Voldemort to hold his soul, that would resurrect him if he ever were to die. This is pretty much what a phylactery is, a device to resurrect a lich after every death. The only way to permanently kill a lich is to destroy their phylactery, then slay them before they can make another. I find this to be really cool, and I really like liches, although the magic aspect of them makes me lose a small amount of respect. Death Knights, however, are far different from liches. They got their immortality from committing a single evil act, rather than the sacrifice of countless innocent souls. The Chad Death Knight versus the Virgin Lich. Death Knights are everything I like about liches, without the things I don't. They are honorable, respectful, and merciful, to the weak at least. They wield swords in close combat, rather than throwing spells and piles of undead onto their victims. They are badass, and I love them. Also, their phylacteries are their swords, and their swords cannot be destroyed until they commit an act of good. So they're basically immortal until they do something good, which is just the coolest thing ever. They have so many cool characters, and they're just so much cooler than liches, at least in my opinion. I actually created a made-up faction for a book I was planning on writing, but I never ended up writing it. They're called Bone Reapers. They hunt undead, and they especially love to kill Death Knights and liches. Death Knights and liches are their preferred prey. That's right, prey. These Bone Reapers are so terrifying, Death Knights will flee from them to avoid a terrible fate. Bone Reapers have a huge forest as their territory, and they take the phylacteries of liches and the swords of Death Knights and put them there. You see, Bone Reapers love to collect trophies, and Death Knights and liches come back from the dead. The Bone Reapers will fight Death Knights and Liches until they are in a position where they are so badly wounded they can't fight back. Then, the Bone Reapers will rip out their spines before they die, which means that the spine will not disintegrate into dust, even though the rest of their bodies will. The Bone Reapers will collect spines, and they will put the phylacteries in their forests, and then they will let the Death Knight or Lich respawn right next to the Bone Reaper who killed them. The Bone Reaper will give the undead a single command: run. After 5 minutes, the Bone Reaper will give chase, and they will hunt down the powerful undead and rip out their spine again. Rinse and repeat. They will collect the spines of the undead until the undead have had enough, and they will destroy their own phylactery, ensuring their last death is permanent. The Bone Reapers will kill the undead until the undead just don't want to be immortal anymore. Then the Bone Reapers, upon exhausting their prey of every spine they could possibly collect, will hunt down another Death Knight or Lich to do it all over again. The Bone Reapers are just badass incarnate, and they are super awesome. They're not necessarily good guys, even though they kill liches. The morally gray factor is something I love. There are also other undead, such as ghosts, but I'm sure you've heard a lot about those. They're just people's souls made manifest into a form that you can see, even though you can't interact with them. But anyway, that's enough about undead. Let's talk about necromancy itself. Necromancy is a subtle art. The undead themselves are not. Necromancy is always portrayed as evil, but I feel like that's not always the case. I think that raising a person from the dead, granted that you do it right, can be a noble act. In Dungeons & Dragons, raising someone from the dead, with their conscience and soul intact, with their consent, is still necromancy. When you use this spell, it specifies that they have to want to come back from the dead. It's not like you're ripping their soul out of the afterlife and shoving it back into their body. Let's say a parent just lost their child, and they bring their kid back from the dead with necromancy, with all their memories, their consciousness, and their soul, all completely intact. Is that evil? I wouldn't say so. That's also why most people resort to necromancy, to bring back loved ones. Most people aren't using necromancy to raise an army of zombies and take over the world. They just want a loved one back. It's also part of why necromancy is considered evil, because it often goes wrong and brings back the person as a zombie. They don't do it on purpose, but it's a common occurrence. A lot of people mistake animate dead for raise dead, which are two completely different spells. So just be careful what spells you use to bring back your loved ones, because if you do it wrong, you could bring them back as a zombie, and you'll never get to know the real person again. But yeah, I don't think necromancy is inherently evil, it's just who uses it that matters. Of course, one could argue that true resurrection isn't necromancy. Some call resurrection miracles, but we'll talk about miracles later in the video. But on the other side of necromancers, let's talk about the evil ones. These necromancers raise entire armies of undead to take over the world. I love these guys, because they're just so evil. I love villains, if you didn't know. Necromancy, when used in this fashion, is essentially playing God, and I love it when fictional characters do that. That's why I love necromancy so much. It's so morally gray. It has the potential to be both good and evil. Miracles, however, are a different story. I'll be straight and honest with you, I don't like miracles in fiction. They are only used by the pure of heart, with only those who have the purest of intentions, and they can only be used for good and whatever. I don't like that. I don't like fictional characters that are completely good. They're just so boring, and not very realistic. If you've read my book, you'll know that the character is morally gray. That's the type of character that I like. I don't like Mr. Perfect over here using miracles. I mean, yeah, there's a time and place for that, but no mortal creature is perfect. Only God is perfect, and his miracles reflect that. Miracles can only be used to heal and never to kill. Miracles are spells that heal, and that's about it. That's another reason why I don't like them. There's not too much variety to them. I mean, they can also make people stronger, but the spells center around being supportive of others who fight, and not actually doing the fighting yourself. I mean, necromancy is the same, but necromancy is more about making an army and controlling them as they fight, while miracles are about making your living allies stronger and healthier as they fight. I prefer necromancy, but that's just me. Miracles are centered around faith to a god and gaining power through that god's favor. That's another thing that I don't like. Necromancers have to earn their magic through study and practice, but paladins and clerics just gain their power from their god and their faith. Necromancers sacrifice a lot, but paladins get their power for free. But anyway, that's about all I have to discuss. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below.